Hello and welcome. I'm Roger Ream, and this is the Liberty and Leadership Podcast, a conversation with TFAS alumni, supporters, faculty, and friends who are making a real impact in public policy, business, philanthropy, law, and journalism. Today, I'm excited to be joined by two TFAS alums, Alexis and Justin Black, the co-founders of Redefining Normal and co-authors of Redefining Normal, How Two Foster Kids Beat the Odds and Discovered Healing, Happiness, and Love, a 12-time award-winning book about opening up and healing from past trauma. Alexis and Justin and I will chat today about the work they do within their company, their roles in advocating for foster care youth, and their past experiences that have impacted them and who they are today. Alexis, Justin, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure to be able to speak to you. Pleasure to speak as TFAS alum and share everything we're doing. And we're just excited.
Yes, thank you.
First of all, could you tell me how you met and how that has shaped your story?
Yeah, so a little bit about how we met. This is actually the first chapter in our book, Redefining Normal. So we met at Western Michigan University, both from Michigan. I'm from Detroit. She's from Flint, Michigan. And we met at Western Michigan in 2016. I was an incoming freshman. She was a junior at the time. And we met in a program called the CETA Scholars Program for foster youth and higher education. And it's basically a program that supports youth transitioning into college who may have had experiences in the child welfare system, and basically just guiding them, supporting them, campus coaches, resources, and everything like that. And we met on the first day before the program even started. They have a summer early transition week, so you get used to where your classes are, meet your campus coach, and get familiar with the university. And we met on the first day of that summer program, and we just started talking ever since, and then started talking all summer before the school year even began, and eventually later that year started dating. So
Well, we have a key member of our team at TFAS who's a Western Michigan alum, and we get students from there quite often. It's a wonderful school in Kalamazoo, right?
Yep. Wow, I might have to reach out to them. I didn't know you guys had someone on your team from Western. That's awesome.
Yeah, and you had a great experience there. But this program brings together students who've been through foster care and provides scholarships for you to attend Western Michigan. That sounds like a great program. Do you know of many of those at other schools?
Yeah, so the CETA Scholars Program was the premier program in the country. It was one of the very first to ever exist. And at first, it really started with being resources and a campus coach and a scholarship. And then it also turned into other things like providing transitional housing, because most foster youth are homeless over holiday breaks, such as Christmas, spring break, things like that, because they don't have anywhere to go. And so our school and the program really tried to fulfill those gaps. And so there are programs now all over the country at mainly, I would say they're primarily at the state schools, but our school has one of the largest ones. About 80% of the foster youth in Michigan who go to college go to Western.
Wonderful. And I'll point out, and we'll touch on it a little later, but now you're married and you welcomed a daughter into the world a few months ago, and we'll talk about that. But that's a spoiler alert. So you dated at Western Michigan, and I think Alexis, it was you first who discovered TFAS and came to a TFAS program?
Yes. So I was actually a Newman Civic Fellow, if you're familiar with that. And so the former president of my university selected one student to represent our campus. And so I was selected as a Newman Civic Fellow. And then from that, I received an email to apply for TFAS. It was the Leadership in the American Presidency program. And I wasn't going to apply because I felt like I had too many things going on. I think what would have happened was, and what did happen was I did, I think it was 2 back-to-back study abroad programs. I came home for 2 weeks, and then I would go to DC for the semester. And I thought that would be too much, to be gone that much. But then Justin encouraged me the night that it was due to apply. And I'm like, okay, well, fine, I'll try it. And for the only way for me to go was through the scholarship. And so I was actually awarded a full scholarship and for the full semester. And so that is exactly what happened. I was gone all summer, back to back study abroads, came home for about a week, then was gone for the semester.
So that was program that focuses and still focuses on leadership and the leadership styles of various American presidents, and you had an internship attached to it. And can you just talk just briefly about that experience in the program, and maybe what your assessment of was that being in Washington?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely 100% once in a lifetime opportunity. I was able to live right next to the Library of Congress. I had an internship that I could walk to. It was absolutely amazing. And then two of the people that I live with, they actually were bridesmaids in my wedding. And then my friend, our neighbor who's also in the program, he's one of my best friends now. So I have three of my lifelong friends from that program, some of the closest humans I have around me. And it also helped me expand a lot of my worldview. I think, unfortunately, coming from both of us, from Flint and Detroit, I think we tend to have, and from foster care, you tend to have a very limited worldview on things. And so when you can expand outside of that and go to a different environment and be surrounded by people who have very different worldviews and ideologies and things like that, whereas my one, I mentioned my bridesmaids. One was a Mormon, and the other one was a stronger Republican, which I was more Democrat at the time. So it was just, it was an interesting dynamic for me to just, test the waters and meet new people. And that was one of the first times that I was able to really meet people outside of, I guess, my demographic and viewpoint and things like that. And then my other friend, we just went to events pretty much every day for the whole semester. I wrote down every single event that I went to, and I filled up probably 2.5 pages in my journal, just because I was like, this is amazing. I've never been to a city where I could do an event every single day if I wanted to. So it was an absolutely phenomenal experience, and I wish I could do it over and over again.
Yeah.
I talk about it all the time.
Well, when you mentioned the broadening of your kind of worldview, it reminded me of something this summer. I had breakfast with about a dozen students one morning, and I happened to ask them. Now, I said, when you get back to the dorm at night after attending classes and your internships, do you tend to have heated arguments about things going on in the world, about, say, recent Supreme Court decisions? And of course, the Dobbs decision on abortion had just come out, and there were some other controversial decisions by the Supreme Court. And I was struck by the first answer a young woman said, actually, no, we don't argue at all. We just want to listen to each other's viewpoints, hear different opinions, and come to appreciate how people come about with their different opinions. And I thought, that's great. That's exactly what we want you to be able to do, is have civil discussions with people you don't agree with. So I'm glad that that's reinforced by what you just said, Alexis. Now, Justin, Alexis, I take it, encouraged you to do a TFAS program the following year. Is that right?
Yeah, she did. She did. And at the time, I was doing journalism, and that was kind of my direction in college at the time, focusing in on journalism before switching my major. And did the journalism program, and I interned at the National Black Child Development Institute right outside of DC. And DC was kind of a life-changing experience. It helped me with my discipline today, needing to make sure I'm at the metro on time, make sure I get my clothes organized, my suits together and everything. And it was a fun experience doing that during the summer when in like 90-degree weather with a full suit on. So I had to learn from other people, like, hey, you don't need to wear your suit on the metro. You can, change your outfit when you get to your internship. So small things like that. And then being like 8 to 12 minutes from the Lincoln Memorial. So it's just like, in an environment that just encourages me to be disciplined, be healthy, going for a jog every night to the Lincoln Memorial. It's just the mindset that DC influenced me to have is something that I carried on as an entrepreneur now, as a parent, my marriage, and in every aspect of my life, really.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we'll touch on one other TFAS experience you had a little bit later, but now I'd love to get into the work you're doing now. You wrote a book, Redefining Normal: How Two Foster Kids Beat the Odds and Discovered Healing, Happiness, and Love. It's a powerful title, a powerful book. Uh, Talk to me about kind of what led you to write this book and to focus so much energy in this area of foster care and redefining normal. I mean, I'm taken by, the importance of what you're doing in trying to help others establish healthy practices that, as you say, break the cycle. So I'd love to
Yeah.
hear you. Let's talk some about that now.
Absolutely. I mean, I think throughout life, generally, people were kind of planting the seed that we both need to write a book. And I think it was around. Well, I know it was around the time where my internship ended in DC, and we were talking about if we were to write a book, what would that look like? And then the following year, so it was January 2020, we were on our way to South Africa, and we actually stopped in Egypt, and we're like, let's start thinking about it. What would that look like? And initially, we thought the book was going to be about healthy relationships because that's something, is the lowest hanging fruit of a book topic that we could choose. It was something we talk about every day. This was a topic that we don't see in our communities of people talking about. With almost everybody we knew were in unhealthy relationships. I was in an 8-year abusive relationship, so I had personal experience in that. So I wanted to teach other people how to really avoid that. What are the red flags? All that good stuff. And but then I got really overwhelmed with the idea of writing a book by myself, especially since I'm not a writer. That's not my skill set. I'm very like type A, logistical, get things done person. But Justin is very the creative and the brilliant writer, and and that's his thing. And so I said, let's do this together. And as we were starting to do the process, we thought to ourselves, okay, well, what establishes what you view as healthy? And where does that come from? Well, that comes from what do you view as normal? And then to take it a step further, what else has been normalized? And so that's where we came from, the idea and the thought of redefining normal, because everybody has their own definition of what normal is based on your family, community, or society. And that's really just reinforced moving forward. And so if you have parents or a community that teaches you very unhealthy dynamics of communication, love, family, all those things, and that's now your normal, and that's what you're going to proceed with in relationships. And so we couldn't write a book about relationships without going back to the root of what set your normal. And so that's really where the concept came from. And then we decided that we were going to write the book back and forth in each of our narratives, because we wanted to make sure that people could physically see that in order for us to come together and have a healthy relationship and marriage, that we had to each deal with our own stuff, be held accountable. We had to go through our own individual journeys of healing and self-discovery before we could come together and have that healthy relationship. And that's where the last section of the book, called Agreement, is written as one voice. And every other chapter is written in sort of individually, back, bouncing off of each other with different topics. And that's really, how we structured it. And we never read a book, structured in that way. So we just kind of made it up as we went. And that was my thing. I'm good at, the organizing and figuring things out. And he was very much my person of, I'm going to speak to you of the things that happen, and can you write it out in a nicer way than what I do? Because I tend to write very, what is it called? Police report style, where it's like, this happened at this time and no feelings or anything. And then Justin comes in and he puts in, the feelings and the surroundings and stuff like that. So it was 100%, a team effort. And a book generally takes about 5 years to write. And we drafted our first draft in 3 months. And then we decided to print it and read it out loud together. And that was a way also for us to build empathy for each other's story. So I read all his parts out loud, and he read all my parts out loud as a way to go through the book the first time. So it was definitely also like a healing process before we got married, just to make sure every single thing was out on the table. We knew everything about each other so that we could be as I guess proactive in marriage. That's what it really started as. First was a project of how do we get closer together before marriage with our backgrounds.
But even just beyond the foster care aspect, I think that it's important to realize or think about as an individual, your character traits, your principles, your values, and how that meshes with another person. And that relationship that you have, that relationship and that marriage that you have, is going to influence the next 4 to 5 to 6 plus generations. And you're going to create the standard. You're going to create the normal. And whether foster care or not, many of us are going to be in relationships. Many of us are going to have marriages, have children, and you're going to set the normal and set the standard. Whether you want to or not, intentional or unintentional, you're going to set a standard and set a normal. And for us, unfortunately, trauma and unhealthy practices and habits became our normal throughout our childhood and teenage years. But through this book, we want to challenge other people to see what was your normal, and it may not be like, similar to ours, filled with abuse or filled with some type of neglect and trauma, but certain aspects of maybe how you deal with finances, how you communicate, how you approach tough conversations, how you approach raising children, whatever it may be. Have a conversation about it so you can know that your normal is not consisted of something that may be unhealthy or unconducive for the next generation and the generations to come.
I think that's an excellent point, that your story, what you write about, isn't exclusive to kids in foster care. That we all need to, redefine normal, or not all, but a lot of us have situations that require us to redefine normal. I've heard it said that, if you want to be successful in life, you increase the odds of success by doing 4 things and doing them in this order: graduate from high school, get a job, get married, have children. And if you screw up the order and do them in a different order, the chances of success are reduced. You have more challenges in life if you have kids first before you graduate from high school or before you have a job. And I think that just plays to the importance of what you emphasize of developing healthy habits, of finding ways to break the cycle. It's wonderful what that did for your own situation, your own marriage, in your own lives. Sounds like it was a transformative experience writing the book, but it's also now you're influencing others. So talk a little bit about what that book has led to and how you've been able to, build on it through talks you're giving, different things you're doing in life to help spread the word of the book to others.
Yeah, and so we, as foster care alumni, we have been kind of speaking on different subjects throughout our time in foster care as teenagers and through different spaces because we're just active and trying to support and serve. And it wasn't until we created this book and just put all our effort in, tell everybody we know. I don't care if I haven't spoke to you in 3 or 4 years. You're gonna know that I'm writing a book and publishing a book. So getting the word out there about this book, and then just being invited to speak at different places, on different podcasts, on different stages, and making it to where we always encourage foster care youth to receive some type of compensation to speak, but more or less the impact of this, making sure that this is a company, that this is a brand where not only just influence foster care youth and social workers and foster parents, but also students who are transitioning into their career, students and young people who are entering relationships, people who've dealt with trauma or unhealthy practices and habits for decades of their life and don't know how, can't find a solution to figure out, how to progress forward or how to use that for their good. So many populations realizing so many people in populations that need this message and have this conversation. So being super intentional about positioning ourselves to conduct trainings, workshops, collaborating not just with our experiences, but collaborating with counselors and therapists, collaborating with other people who have years of experience as foster parents and just people who've been married for decades and a long time. So combining our lived experience and the information that we have as mentors and mentees, combining that with people who are specialists in other fields and conducting these workshops, trainings, and speeches for different organizations across the country, really, with this message and breaking it down to where it's not just redefining normal, but redefining family, redefining marriage, relationships, career, and all these other aspects that we have some experience and collaborate with other people with, so we can be conduits of information, so we can help and support people, and then be able to produce additional books where we have our Redefining Normal book, and then we have our companion guides where we've created an entire curriculum for youth and students, and books, companion guides, an entire population of just people who loved and supported us and just giving back to them as well.
Alexis, how do you see this going forward? Do you expect to be involved in this far into the future? Certainly the need will be there.
Yeah, I mean, we're all about, how can we build this ecosystem of support in this, uh, I guess in this ecosystem that we're trying to build. That's really what we've been trying to do. And so we, as Justin mentioned, we have other products that we've come out with. So we have our book, we have multiple workbooks. We have a children's book actually coming out on April 2nd, which happens to be his birthday. and National or International Children's Book Day, and it's called "I Love You More Than Cereal." Mava and Dad redefine normal. So it's
Redefine love.
or sorry, redefine love. I get it wrong every time, but so it's really taking the principles from our book and breaking it down into a children's book series with our daughter Mava as the central character in honor of her, and because these messages are important, and our book isn't appropriate for youth 16 and under, and so we're like, how can we make sure that these messages are construed in a way that's that's going to reach them, and so we have like a graphic novel that's coming out. We have all these things, in the pipeline. And we're also going through a rebrand in the moment with, a new logo, new website to make sure that people are aware that we're not just focusing on foster youth. We're generally focusing on people who've experienced trauma. And over 90% of Americans have experienced at least one form of trauma in their lifetime. And with COVID, I would say everybody, everybody has something, as you mentioned, that needs to be redefined. So we're just figuring out how can we reach those different niches and make sure that people don't lump us into a box saying that we only, work on foster youth and things like that. And so that's really where where we see expansion.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is that we, in a perfect world, foster care wouldn't exist, and it's not exactly our goal to make foster care not exist. But for so many people who enter foster care, the cycle continues with their same mindset, their practices and habits, and we want to make sure we're not trying to contribute to make sure we're trying to make sure we're not trying to make a better foster care system. There's a lot of people out here contributing to that and doing that, which is amazing, supporting with policy and other things. But we want to make sure that youth and families don't have to encounter the child welfare system. So giving them the ideas, the practices, developing their skills so they wouldn't need to enter the system or be a part of the system in any way. So trying to do some of the preventative work, which goes into mental and emotional health, sometimes spiritual health, career prep for young people who are, on the brink of maybe having children very young and need support in other ways, or maybe already have children. So trying to support people in so many other ways. So do a lot of the preventative work so they wouldn't have to come in contact with the foster care system.
Yeah. I mean, we have generally traveled full time since we started, when we came up with the book. We have been traveling 2 or 3 weeks a month constantly, and that's a little more difficult when you have a child, especially a newborn. So we're seeing this year of maybe just doing 1 or 2 trips a month, but we do a lot of stuff virtually as well. So we travel, and we love doing it, as a family. But also we have another company where we do real estate on the side. We're purchasing our third property in the next week or two, so we have a lot going on.
Yeah. That entrepreneurial spirit. I love it. Well, you're right, Justin. It's never going to be a perfect world, so the need for what you're doing will always exist, and I'm afraid we'll always have children going into foster care, and so it's wonderful that you're doing this. I do want to ask you about your travel, because as I understand it, you both did quite a few study abroad programs during your college years. I think I've heard Justin say you've been to over 30 countries. I don't know if that applies to both of you or just Justin, but you've both traveled a lot. You did our program in Hong Kong, which sadly we don't do anymore because of changes that have taken place in Hong Kong. Yeah. But it was a fantastic place to go. Could speak to your study abroad experiences. What's prompted you to do so many of those?
Yeah, so I started college, and then I transferred college. So I started at University of Michigan Flint, and then I transferred to Western. And on my tour of Western, one of the tour guides said that the record for study abroad programs was it 6 or 7?
It was 7.
It was 7. So I think subconsciously in my mind, I said, I'm going to beat that. Yes. And so they talked about it on the program, or on the walk around campus, and about how there's just so many resources on campus. If you want to go abroad, you can. We want to make sure that every student who wants to it's accessible. And I could see that in the study abroad office, and then with every single department who had programs. And I had a teacher who really encouraged me to go. I had an entrepreneurship course, and within 2 weeks of having that course, I changed my major, I was in accounting, because I thought, that was going to be the most stable career I could possibly choose. So I wanted to be in accounting. I was good at numbers, but I did an accounting internship and I hated it. And then within 2 weeks, I took the entrepreneurship class and I loved it. I created a concept for a company, and then I studied abroad the next semester, and then it just kind of picked up after that. Every single study abroad that I did, while I was on the program, I was applying for the next one, and so I think I did at least 2 or 3 before I met Justin. And then I said to myself, I want to do another one to Korea, and because I just really want to go there. So I thought to myself, where are places that I want to go, and how could I try to make it fit with with what I'm studying? And so I would write up proposals to my teachers and the advisors of why this program needs to count for the classes that I know it could count for. And I talked Justin into going on a program with me. At first, he really didn't want to go abroad. He didn't want to travel, but then he mentioned how you saw it as an opportunity that we could go abroad together for the summer, and he didn't want to be alone. So he was like, let me just go.
Yeah.
And so we did, Korea was our first program we did together. And then we did at least a couple more together. So we did 13 combined. So it was a lot.
Yeah. And for me, I made a transition from journalism to public relations with a focus on trying to understand how different communities, especially within the US and also outside the country, form community politically, economically. How are these ideas and philosophies shaped, and what is the history and things that go into that, and what are the kind of projections, so to speak, and the influences that go into their success or lack thereof. So with that, going to South Korea, studying economic and political philosophy in South Korea, in countries like Senegal and South Africa, in Hong Kong as well, and trying to bring all this information back to what we do here in the U.S. and hopefully within our businesses as well. And fortunate enough, during my study abroad trips, I noticed that there weren't as many programs on the continent of Africa, and especially within East Africa. So we had one in South Africa and one in Ghana that ran only about 2 or 3 years. So, and then one in Senegal, which unfortunately didn't have the best structure. So it eventually stopped, discontinued. And for me, I wanted to just try to take charge and see how I can support our university with having more programs in Africa. So I did a African Study Abroad night where students came from all over the campus to let us know, their thoughts on the program in Africa. Where would it be? What would be the focuses of it? What would they want to study? And I already had some relationships, or Alexis has some relationships and connections to someone in Uganda through a different program. And from there, we created a Western Michigan University's first multi-country African study abroad program to Rwanda and Uganda. And unfortunately, we created the program in it was the spring of 2020, like January 2020, when it was first created, and the first program was supposed to go in December 2020. So that didn't happen. So that kind of threw things off a bit. So we have yet to actually go on a trip, but I was able to travel to Rwanda and Uganda, meet the people, go to the locations. And that was kind of my first time traveling by myself to East Africa, or just in general, travel by myself. And I did that in East Africa. So that was kind of a bit overwhelming at times, but it was so memorable. It was so parts very enjoyable, and just an exciting time, and something to tell my child about one day and encourage her to do. And yeah, it was just a blessing being able to be a part of that.
Mm-hmm. But I would say that definitely Hong Kong was definitely in our top like 2 or 3 favorite, study abroad programs that we went on. I mean, we still have lifelong friends from there.
Yeah.
We've been invited to weddings. We've been, we're still stay in touch with everybody. So it's, I mean, just TFAS does a phenomenal job with bringing together individuals from all over the world and from different backgrounds, and coming together to where it's very cohesive and supportive and healthy, debates and conversations and things. So I always have felt like TFAS and my family over at AEI, you guys all do a phenomenal, job with bringing together people and just creating healthy and safe spaces for conversation.
Yeah, because the one in TFAS program in Hong Kong, I mean, just has students from China, students from
Mongolia,
students from Nepal, students really from all over the world, and had us Americans there as well. And just such an enjoyable experience to be able to interact and just have those conversations, learn about other cultures. We have our perspective as Americans, but learn about other cultures and ways of living from their perspective while they're in from those countries that we have conversations about, but getting kind of the inside scoop, so to speak, of what is their day to day life like, what is their systems of operating like, and just how they can contribute to our group as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you were in Hong Kong, that was 2019.
Yes.
There were a lot of protests going on at that time,
Oh yeah.
right?
Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
subways were shut down. We weren't allowed to go off campus at certain hours and stuff like that. But I mean, I think from my semesters in DC, I just kind of got, I don't know, I get excited about being in all that. So it was kind of exciting for me.
Yeah.
I just happened to be in places at some of the biggest, moments. Like we were in DC when the abortion legislation just happened with Supreme Court. We were in Hong Kong during that, and then I was in South Africa during the Roads Must Fall debacle. So it was
Just
we
know
just happened to be in
if
these.
Alexis comes to your country, then she's gonna bring some chaos with her.
There's gonna be some chaos that happens.
Yeah, well, we just held a dinner in New York in November where we gave our Ken Tomlinson Award for Courage to Jimmy Lai, who is currently in prison in Hong Kong. He's a big supporter of the rule of law and democracy, and he tried very hard to get China, Beijing, to uphold the terms of its treaty with the UK, which turned over to Hong Kong. And just 2 days ago, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison for a minor violation in the lease he had on his office headquarters building. Just terrible.
Wow.
They don't want him out of prison. He's 75 now, and I think that Beijing wants to keep him in prison the rest of his life. And we're trying to draw some attention to his plight. But he didn't want to leave Hong Kong because he wanted to support those students who were in the streets protesting for the rule of law and democracy. And so we're continuing to shine a light on that, even though our plan was to move the program to Singapore. But again, because of COVID, we haven't held it. So we're still in Prague with 2 programs. We're going to be in Santiago, Chile in January with a Latin America program. I do think, share your view that the study abroad experiences for Americans are so broadening, so valuable, and no doubt it's been great for you to participate in those programs. And I don't have any doubt that your daughter, Mava Rose, someday will have those experiences traveling the world with the 2 of you or as a student on an exchange program.
Yeah.
So
we're already planning.
I know. Yeah, good. I've heard Justin say, Alexis, that you do things in 2-year cycles, I guess. You met in 2016, you got engaged in 2018, you got married in 2020, and you had Mava Rose in 2022.
Yep.
In September, right?
Yep.
August.
She was due in September.
Okay, in August. Great. And did that inspire you then to write your latest book, I Love You More Than Cereal?
Yeah, so funny story. While we were dating, and even while we were talking on the phone that summer when we first met, it was weird. We would just say like, "All right, what cereal are you eating tonight?" and "What cereal are you eating tonight?" And it's just we have funny conversations, and it's just like 2 odd cereal lovers just coming together. But even more important than the cereal aspect, it's the concept of in this world, we think that some people are deserving of love and some people aren't based on their actions, and it has a faith-based foundation to it. But we wanted to create a concept for kids that we are all deserving, or we all should to give and receive love, and have that conversation on how to give and receive love for children, and even for people who quote unquote don't deserve it. Making sure that we are serving people in a way, because we've all had moments where we think we don't deserve love, or think we were not our best, and hopefully we have someone around us who are still there to love and support us and contribute to us and treat us how we should be treated. So understanding how to adapt that model and give to other people in the same way.
Mm-hmm. We even have photos of us eating cereal at our wedding. We brought cereal and everything at the wedding.
Yeah.
Okay, you're speaking on a very serious subject, but I do have to ask you, favorite cereal, each of you.
Count Chocula.
Mine is usually on by the season. I go by Special K sometimes in the summer. In the winter, I may go for like a Honey Bunches of Oats, or in the fall maybe like a Cinnamon Toast Crunch. So it's by the season.
Well, I think that's an appropriate question to ask two people who went to college in Kalamazoo, which isn't far from Battle Creek, home of
Yep.
Kellogg's.
I worked
So,
at Kellogg before, so yep.
yeah, I think before we went on the air, the engineer here told me that Count Chocula was his favorite as well. So,
I love
Wow,
it.
I didn't think anybody else liked it.
I
But
buy like 10 boxes when they come out every season.
well, my favorite cereal is something called Smart Start, and it had a supply chain issue about a year
I've heard of
ago.
that one.
Smart Start, I couldn't get it. It was not on the shelves for about 3 months, so I now make sure I have like 5 or 6 boxes in my inventory at any one time to deal with
I gotta
any
check it
future.
out. I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, Smart Start. Yeah, I think it's, well, I won't guess which maker is it. Well, we're coming up on our time limit here, but do you have advice you might offer to students with similar backgrounds to yours? In terms of how to be successful? I mean, I know it's in your book, but maybe you could offer a little advice here on how students with difficult backgrounds, traumatic, dysfunctional, foster care, all can deal with that besides just reading your book.
Yeah, we may have to just cut for a quick second. Baby is starting to get riled up a little bit. 1 second.
Oh, we don't mind hearing a baby. We want to see her, of course. That would be even better.
If we give her the bottle, she's good.
Right, so
awesome. We're back.
So you said advice for youth and students who may have come from a similar background. Two things I would say is that we a lot of times do workshops based on matching people's skills and making sure that we all have different skills, different things that we've been blessed with, that we had to maybe develop, nurture, and all of our skills are directly matched to some of the problems in our local community, national community, global community. So we have to start to work to identify different skills and things that we have in order to serve and be able to solve those problems. And I would just encourage youth to think about your experiences. Think about if you combine your experiences, some of your dreams with some of the problems that need to be solved, you can identify your career and your pathway in life and your purpose. And the second thing I would say, as it relates to purpose, one thing that our pastors always told us is to make sure that you die empty, meaning that, many of our dreams, our ideas, and some of the greatest inventions are in the graveyard because they never came to existence because we kept them in our mind, we kept them in our heart, and we take them to the grave with us. And making sure that we die, if you're an author writing books, make sure you can write all the books you can, get all the information you can through books, podcasts, some platform. If you are any type of creative, or you are engineer, whatever it may be, making sure you are dying empty, making sure you're putting all your ideas out there, because some of your ideas, our book, other books that we'll write, some of our ideas and experiences are directly tied to helping and supporting other people getting through what they're getting through. And if we don't write that book, if we don't create that idea or make it come to life, then basically we'll be robbing people of their ability to grow and develop. So if we weren't writing our book, we will be robbing someone of someone else's abilities to grow and develop. And it's super important that we do that, that we get our ideas out. So not only just for ourselves, but so other people can get through their circumstances and get through their situations and be a conduit of information to pass that along to someone else and be super intentional about that. So that's something that we're passionate about, having 5-year, 10-year plans. Even though life may change, we didn't imagine we'll be where we are right now in life, but making sure you have the idea and the plan to get it all out, to make sure you're inspiring and supporting other people along the way.
Well, Alexis and Justin Black, thank you so much for joining me on the Liberty and Leadership podcast. It's been truly inspiring to hear your story. Now you go hug that baby, Mava Rose, and remember in 20 years to send her to TFAS for a summer in Washington. Thank you so much for being with me.
Will do. Thank y'all
Will
so
do.
much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Liberty and Leadership Podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe, download, like, or share the show on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you like this episode, I ask you to rate and review it. And if you have a comment or question for the show, please drop us an email at podcast@tfas.org. The Liberty and Leadership Podcast is produced at K Global Studios in Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Roger Ream, and until next time, show courage in things large and small.